560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Yesterday, at his press conference, President again, Trump, was asked if he's going to let the AP out of the penalty box, and here's what he said about the Associated Press.
But the Associated Press just refuses to go with what the law is and what is taking place. It's called the Gulf of America now. It's not called the Gulf of Mexico any longer. I have the right to do it, just like we have the right to do Mount McKinley, and nobody's even challenging that. But only the essentially, it's primarily the Associated Press, and I don't know what they're doing, but I just say that we're going to keep them out until such time as they agree that it's the Gulf of America. We're very proud of this country, and we want it to be the Gulf of America. Now, the Associated Press, as you know, has been very, very wrong on the election, on Trump and the treatment of Trump and other things having to do with Trump and Republicans and conservatives. And they're doing us no favors, and I guess I'm not doing them any favors. That's the way life works, but, you know.
I guess that is the way life works. I'm not going to do you any favors if you're not doing me any favors. That seems fair enough. But Mr. President, you don't understand how indispensable the AP is. Without the AP, we don't have freedom of the press. This is the sort of argument you heard from state-funded media, NPR, Tamara Keith, and Jeff Bennett. Take a listen to these two reacting to this contretemps between Trump and AP.
The White House, by going after AP for an editorial choice, is going directly at the First Amendment. It is going directly at the freedom of the press, and it is not coincidental that they are going after AP. AP is extremely influential. They're also kind of straight down the line. They are not a partisan news outlet in any way.
No, of course not. Jeff Bennett echoed that sentiment.
And this is a fight that this White House would want. To paint the press as opponents rather than the neutral observers that we are and that we're supposed to be.
Exactly. They're neutral observers on the take in the case of those two from taxpayers. And AP, it turns out, as well. But they're neutral observers. They have no partisan affiliations. They have no policy preferences. They know no political identity. They're just neutral scriveners of the passing scene. Because that's what we've all experienced, right? Chadwick Moore, New York Times bestselling author of Tucker, the definitive biography of Tucker Carlson. He writes at his Substack, substack.com/@ChadwickMoore. Chadwick, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be back with you guys.
Good to have you. So, what is all this this acrimony between the Associated Press and Trump? Doesn't he understand they are just observers of the scene, integral to a robust free press, so we have an informed electorate and a better country?
Right. Well, first of all, you were correct to point out that, like NPR, AP is also on the taxpayer money take. You just search government documents. They've taken over $52 million of taxpayer money since 2008. And this whole reaction, first of all, this started with them being banned from the Oval Office reception. Now, there's somewhere around 12 to 15 different media outlets that are present at any given Oval Office reception. So nobody needs the AP to tell them what happened. But I think the greater effect of this is as the AP and their friends are screaming and crying about attacks on the press and how important and vital the Associated Press is to the functions of democracy, et cetera, it's really having the effect of, and I think this is probably what's intended by the Trump administration because he's a master at this, it's having the effect of shining a negative spotlight on the AP and all of the media by, number one, showing how little you actually need them to get information. I mean, after all, the entire last election was won with the media totally in opposition to Trump, and Trump skirting the media and taking his message to podcasts, independent media, social media. But it also is showing a spotlight on not only how little access the press had to Joe Biden compared to Trump's basically wide open door policy, and the extent to which the Biden administration was actually violating the First Amendment of Americans, especially through strong-arming social media companies into silencing people and information they didn't like. So it's having a boomerang effect on the Associated Press, I believe, but they don't really seem to see that.
Well, how and why did they get $52 million of government money?
Well, the majority of this came from an organization called the U.S. Global Media Fund. Lord knows where it went, how it came from, but that was about $37 million of it. And then others came from various departments scattered about. So, once again, just like with Politico and other news organizations that we saw getting this money, the documents that we have available to us on usaspending.gov haven't really broken down exactly where they came from or how it was spent, but those are the invoices that were fulfilled. So hopefully there'll be more accounting of that.
Yeah, it's just, like for Politico, it's just sort of subscriptions. $8 million worth of subscriptions from USAID employees. That's a lot of subscriptions at a pretty penny. I mean, this is what the left is doing. And we had been talking about this for a long time, but Doge really put a spotlight on it. Now it's maybe getting a little bit more attention, the attention it deserves, frankly. But we see this at the state level in Illinois, the General Assembly here, Governor Jelly Belly here. They want to move to fund local media with taxpayer dollars because, local newspapers are drying up and they need to make sure that their propaganda gets out into the masses. And so for these outlets that are struggling, whether they're major city dailies or local weeklies, we have to prop them up so that they continue to reprint our press releases. And it's that was the same thing going on in D.C.
Oh, for sure. That seems to be exactly what was happening. I mean, even with Politico's pay system, I mean, what possibly could Politico have that's worth one of those prescriptions like $10,000 a year? If not, it seems like a system that was set up precisely for this. If you pay this massive amount of money for these prescriptions, well, we'll take note of that and probably give you favorable coverage or do, and not just for governments. I mean, who knows who else could be buying into this system.
I love the posture too that without the Associated Press that you hear from these NPR flacks. Without the Associated Press, you don't understand how indispensable they are. They do this, they do that. They cover the president's comings and goings and so forth. Without the Associated Press, we don't have a free press anymore. It sounds like the aggrieved federal worker. Without me being employed at EPA, we won't have clean air and clean water. I mean, it's just the idea that every outlet of their preference and every person of their preference is just integral to Western civilization. And without them in their position, on their own terms, as they see fit, the whole thing's going to collapse in on itself.
Oh, you're so true. The hubris of the grandstanding. But, this is the Associated Press also picked this fight because, I'll tell you one thing, and I'll give them a little bit of credit here. They are using Mount McKinley by their rules because Mount McKinley lies fully within the United States. The United States can name it whatever it wants. The Gulf of America, they argue is shared by 3 countries. So they initially said they will use both terms, but they didn't really explain what that meant. So if you look at the Gulf of California, that's a U.S. designated name. It lies in Mexico, and in Mexico it's called the Sea of Cortez. The Associated Press primarily refers to it as the Gulf of California, and then it will do it like an aside where it says, also known as the Sea of Cortez, somewhere in an article they're writing about the Gulf of California. So if that's what they plan to do with the Gulf of America, they could have made that more clear, but they didn't. And so they also kind of instigated this, knowing that they could probably pick a fight with Trump and think it might work out well for them.
Right.
But it doesn't seem to be.
Right. I mean, but they're these sort of, this AP style business, right? Their chosen words and phrases to describe a whole range of people and things, has been Orwellian for many, many years. I mean, they're the sort of the minders and the scolds that the rest of the minders and the scolds take their cues from. But they've been redefining taxes as contributions and illegal aliens as, undocumented asylum seekers for a long time.
No, completely. And actually, just this morning, I was rereading an article about a transgender biological male who identifies as a trans woman who attempted to assassinate Scott Bessent, if you recall this a couple weeks ago. And the AP just refers to this person as a woman. No, just a woman arrested for this, no mention of anything else. So the AP does have this Orwellian way of trying to manipulate language to alter reality.
How have you, thinking back to Trump 1.0 and the big blow up over enemy of the people, the DC press corps being the enemy of the people, and everybody clutching their pearls and rediscovering the First Amendment and making a lot of specious First Amendment claims, as you're hearing here with respect to the Associated Press, but nonetheless draping themselves in it. How do you compare from what you've seen in the first month, Trump 1.0 to Trump 2.0 in terms of dealing with the press and the press dealing with him?
Despite all of this, they do seem much, better behaved than they were the first time around, in the sense that I think they're more frightened of the backlash against them, that nothing has worked ever that they've tried to throw against him. There seems to be at least some, they're struggling with their identity in the same way that their party, the Democrats, are struggling, it appears, at least from just sort of watching them, in a way that they weren't the first time, because they were all on mode for resistance. We've got to, get rid of the orange dictator, etc. But they've lost that a bit. They're in the woods far more and have far little less purpose than they did the first time around.
Chadwick Moore, New York Times bestselling author of Tucker, the definitive biography on Tucker Carlson. You can read his writings at his Substack, substack.com/@ChadwickMoore. Chadwick, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
When I started skiing, I didn't think about setting any records. When I won my first race, I didn't think about how many more I might win. So when I made it to the top of the world, it never crossed my mind to stop. Being the best isn't the same as